All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So today we're picking up with the Bill of Rights and the Anti-Federalist versus Federalist debate that we got into a little bit. The Federalists wanted the ratification of the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists were opposed to the ratification of the Constitution. And at first, several states ratified the Constitution right away. They almost did it unanimously because people were largely in favor of changing away from the Articles because it was unpopular. The problem was people realized a lot of rights are not protected in the Constitution, and that, in fact, there's no Bill of Rights. Every state protected rights in a Bill of Rights, but our federal Constitution isn't going to protect those rights. A lot of Americans were scared about that. For example, there was no protection of freedom of speech. Could the government limit our freedom of speech then? There was no right to protect us to keep and bear arms in case we were ever invaded again, and we could fight off the government. There was no right against cruel and unusual punishment, against illegal search and seizures, to preserve a fair jury trial. None of those rights were listed anywhere in the Constitution. So that's what a Bill of Rights is. It's a list of rights that you have as citizens. So the Federalists had to cave, and they had to give in and allow for a Bill of Rights to be added to the Constitution. So the first action of the first Congress of the United States of America was introducing a Bill of Rights, a list of amendments that could be added to the Constitution to preserve rights. So while it's easy to call the Federalists the winners and the Anti-Federalists the losers, the reason you have that protection of freedom of religion, the reason you don't have soldiers sleeping in your home at night is because of the Anti-Federalists. So can you list 5 rights outlined in the Bill of Rights? I'm going to see if I can take it one further and see if I can list all 10 Bill of Rights. So the First Amendment protects your freedom of speech, your freedom of religion, your freedom to petition the government, your freedom of the press, and your freedom to freely associate with other people without government limitation. Your Second Amendment is your right to keep and bear arms for a well-regulated militia. Your Third Amendment is protecting you against the quartering of troops in your home. Your Fourth Amendment preserves you against illegal search and seizure. So if they're going to search your home or search your property, they have to have a warrant. Your Fifth Amendment protects you against self-incrimination. So you do not have to testify against yourself in a court of law. The Sixth Amendment protects your right to an attorney and your right to a speedy trial. The Seventh Amendment protects a jury by trial in what we call civil cases. So if you're being sued, you also have the right to a trial by jury. Then you have the Eighth Amendment against cruel and unusual punishment. And the Ninth and Tenth Amendment both say the rights that are listed here are not the only rights you have. Rights are preserved to the people and to the states. So those are the 10 rights in the Bill of Rights. Okay, so next, what are the principles of the Constitution? First, popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty is the idea that the reason our government has authority is because the people allow it to have that authority. The people are the ultimate source of power in the American government. The reason they're in power, the reason our government has authority is because we, the people, allow them to have that power. Second is separation of powers. Separation of powers is the principle that we have 3 branches of government and they all perform separate duties. The executive branch executes the laws. The legislative branch makes the laws. The judicial branch interprets the laws. And they do those powers separately. Third is a limited government. Our government does not have unlimited power over our lives and unlimited power and control in what they can and can't do. They do not have that type of power. They are limited by the Constitution of the things that they're permitted to do. 4 is federalism. Federalism is the idea that, yes, we have a central government of the United States of America, but every state has their own government and their own protections of rights, and that we have to balance that power between the central government and more localized authority. 5 is checks and balances. Checks and balances are written all throughout the Constitution to preserve the balance of power between the 3 branches. The founders did not intend for any one branch to be supremely powerful over the other ones. So they inserted parts of the Constitution where each branch could check the other one. For example, Congress can pass a law with a simple majority in the House and Senate. If the president doesn't like that law, he can veto it, and it doesn't become law. Now, if Congress is really upset at a presidential veto, they have a check on the president, an override with a 2/3 majority vote to override that presidential veto. Let's say Congress makes a law and the president signs off on it and they're all really excited about it. The judicial branch has the check of saying, that law is unconstitutional. We checked and you can't actually make a law like that. So there are all of these checks and limitations on each branch to make sure nobody becomes tyrannical and taking away your freedoms. Number 6 is representative government. Essentially, how do our representatives get into office and gain power? The people. We, the people of the United States, are in charge of this government. Literally, we choose the people running for office. Okay? Next, this two-party system I think is an important principle. It's not on your notes, but I think it's something worthy of talking about. And that's that early on in American history, the way our system is set up in what we call winner-take-all system, if you win, you take all of the power. It sets it up for a two-party system where you're going to have two competing interests trying to gain power in the country. So the first party created was the Federalist Party. The leaders of that were Alexander Hamilton and John Adams. They believed in a strong central government, a more influential central banking system, and stronger alliances with the British because we could make more money aligning with the British. Then you had the Democratic Republican Party, led by Jefferson and Madison. Now, Jefferson and Madison wanted a small government. They wanted a pastoral, a farming America was their vision for the future of our country. And they also believed that we should be loyal to France. France helped us out in the war. We should be loyal to them. So those are the two-party systems that get established, and there's a lot of conflict between those two early on in American history, just like there are between Republicans and Democrats today. That's not a new phenomenon in American history. Next, let's talk about a major event in American history, the Louisiana Purchase. $15 million to nearly double the size of the United States today. If you translate that in today's money, you're talking about over $580 billion. So this is a huge sum of money that we're handing over to the French to double the size of the United States. Now, I put on here, this is a major flip-flop for Jefferson. Why? Jefferson used $15 million, the equivalency of $580 billion today, to double the size of the United States. Well, isn't he the guy that was a big Democratic Republican that was against a big government and for small government? So he kind of backs out on that. But thankfully, he did back out on that idea in his own personal view on that, because now we have this huge chunk of territory that you can see on the PowerPoint. One more slide here. Let's talk about judicial review really quickly. Judicial review is the power of the Supreme Court and courts in general to rule acts of the president or Congress unconstitutional. Is this a good idea or a bad idea? Well, first of all, it's nowhere in the Constitution. The Supreme Court gave this power to themselves, which is pretty cool, honestly. But without judicial review, the Supreme Court would be pretty weak. Notice when we talk about checks and balances, I listed judicial review as the major power that they have. And like I said, the founders didn't write it in the Constitution. So overall, it's been able to keep the presidency and the Congress in check and not allow them to gain additional power by passing laws or writing executive orders. The Supreme Court can check that and limit them. The case that established this was Marbury versus Madison. There's a lot of intricate details in the case of Marbury versus Madison that we'll dive into in class. But essentially what you need to know is that John Adams appoints a bunch of judges called the Midnight Judges right before he leaves office. And the president had the power to do that. Well, the next day, Jefferson comes into office. He doesn't want all of these judges muddying up the court system, slowing everything down to make him less sustainable as the president. So the Chief Justice at the time, a guy named John Marshall, rules that the law that allows the president to appoint judges without congressional approval is unconstitutional. So it's not necessarily that this Marbury was undeserving. It's that, you know what? The law itself was unconstitutional. So judicial review continues to be controversial. It was used in Obamacare. It was used in same-sex marriage in Obergefell versus Hodges a few years ago to legalize same-sex marriage. So using this power can really extend to the states and influence our country. Thank you.